Yikes. They only use this type of logic, this type of math when they're trying to minimize an issue. If somebody wants to find a gun, they're going to find a gun. If somebody wants to kill somebody, they're going to kill somebody. So for them to act like, oh yeah, we're looking into fatherlessness, you're not putting no money into that. What's going on, everybody? I am Doc Loading, and today we're going to watch the body bag of the century. I'm talking John Stewart going in on Oklahoma State Representative Nathan Dahm. Now, this video clip has gone viral over the past couple of days, and that's because of the absolute masterclass that Stewart displays, showing the inconsistencies and contradictions in the senator's position on gun control. The first clip that we're going to get into is going to show the slick way that these right-wing individuals discuss the numbers surrounding gun deaths in America in a way that minimizes the problem.
Shall not be infringed. That's the one right that's listed in the Constitution that uses that very specific affirmative language, shall not be.
Oh, it's also the one right that uses the phrase well-regulated.
Correct, when it's talking about the militia and the state.
By the way, just for clarity's sake, I'm not against the Second Amendment. I don't want to ban guns. But you're saying more guns makes us more safe.
Yes.
How?
So when we got 400 million guns in the country, we had an increase and gun deaths went up. So when exactly does this curve hit that takes it down? Would 1 billion guns do it?
Let's just run those numbers, 400 million. 50.
Here we go.
You're talking about a less than a fraction of not even 1%, of 1/100%.
But it goes up.
Now, this is exactly what I'm talking about when I get annoyed with the way that they talk about numbers. They only use this type of logic, this type of math when they're trying to minimize an issue. So look at what he just did. He just took 50,000 people who died by guns, and he compared that to the entire population. But you have to pay attention to the inconsistency between that and the way that we actually cover these things, right? The way that we actually cover homicides and gun deaths and violent crime, it is on the news. It's in your neighborhood watch. It's on your Twitter. It's on your social media. This is emphasized every single day when you turn on the news. And so to juxtapose, to compare the panic, the moral panic and the fear that gets mongered every single day when they talk about urban crime rising, when they talk about how unsafe our cities are. And then on the flip side, to then say, well, if you were to divide, if 2020, there were 19,000 people who died by homicide. If you were to divide that number by 400 million, that's an even smaller number than the 50,000 that they're talking about. Right. So according to his logic, it's just not that big of a deal. And so do you see the inconsistency there? It doesn't make any sense what he's saying based on his own ideology and the people who are on their side. Now, the next clip that we're going to get into is when the senator is going to start talking about his solutions to the gun control problem. And we're going to discuss the ways that the Republican agenda actually doesn't allow for these solutions to ever take place.
You know what would help the problem that we're facing with firearms?
What?
The fatherlessness crisis that we have in America. If you look at the statistics,
Right. Yeah, they're dying from gun death.
80%
Yeah.
of school shooters either came from a broken or fatherless home.
So you would say no guns for fatherless.
It's not what I would say. I would say that fathers need to be more engaged.
So let
Crime with a firearm if they don't have a father,
put more resources into areas that are poverty-stricken. All for it.
and into fatherlessness. And that's something that we're doing.
Why with guns are you against?
So this is the issue that I have of what he's saying. It's very, very slick, and you have to understand the history of this whole issue to recognize the way that even though what he's saying sounds good and it sounds like it makes sense, the Republican Party has actually made this almost impossible from being effective. In order to understand what is going on with guns, you need to study this type of violence. Right? This stuff is extremely complicated, and it's contextual, it's site-specific, it's city-specific, the difference between urban spaces and rural spaces, the difference between suburbs, right? The different types of communities, the race, the ethnicity, the age component. This is such a dynamic topic that we need to understand what is going on. Does that make sense? And in order to do that, you need to study it. In 1996, a rule known as the Dickey Amendment was passed by Congress under pressure from gun lobbyists, and it basically said that no research that was federally funded could promote and present the idea that there should be gun control. And what this did was right after that, they stopped federally funding research on guns. And so for the past, they just recently, I think in 2019 or 2020, they just recently approved some federal funding through Congress to study guns. And the amount that they approved was $50 million a year. And you can compare that to something like HIV and AIDS. They pour billions into that. Substance use, they pour billions of dollars into that. Right? So you want to do some more of that funny math, divide 50 million by, $7 or $8 billion and see what an infinitesimally small number that is. Right? That is going to be a percentage of the amount of money that we spend on these other issues. So what is the saying? Put your money where your mouth is. Well, they can talk about all this stuff if we want to look at fatherlessness, but you need to understand the way that fatherless homes are impacting gun violence specifically. It's not just, we just look at fatherless homes and then all of a sudden we're going to know what to do in order to specifically understand what's happening with these gun deaths, right? The specific situation of what's happening in urban areas when young people are killing each other. The 16 through 24-year-olds are killing each other in inner city areas. The specific situation that's coming with school shooters. These things are very specific. The issues around people killing themselves and suicide, these are all separate issues that are incredibly dynamic, incredibly complicated. And we see how difficult it is to figure out these answers with other things like substance use. We've been studying substance use nonstop with billions and billions and billions of dollars, and we still have not really gotten a dent into drug addiction. It's very difficult. You know what I'm saying? And so for them to act like, oh yeah, we're looking into fatherlessness, you're not putting no money into that. You're not putting money into researching that. You're not connecting those dots, the fatherlessness dots, to the gun death dots. You're not connecting those things. And so all of what's happening behind the scenes is what reveals these things as just disingenuous talking points that make it to where you're not paying attention to how your other actions and the actions of your party are actually making it impossible for you to accomplish your task. Now, the next clip that we're going to get into shows John Stewart holding the senator's feet to the fire, asking him to explain the contradiction between being unwilling to support policy changes that law enforcement has asked for to help them enforce gun laws, and then claiming that he's committed to reducing gun deaths in America.
What the police say, if we had gun registration, if we were able to track purchases, they have a technology that every bullet would be stamped with an individual like a fingerprint. If we had an ATF that wasn't defunded, we would be able to enforce gun laws more effectively, and we would be able to solve gun crimes more effectively. You're against all of that.
Because the person is the threat, not the firearm, not the knife.
I get it.
The person and the individual is the one that is the concern here.
But you don't want anything that could help law enforcement or society determine whether or not a person is a good guy with a gun or a bad guy with a gun.
Most
registry would allow you to have much more effective background checks. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand why you won't just admit that you are making it harder for police to manage the streets by allowing all of these guns to go out without permits, without checks, and without background stuff. Why is that hard? Why can't you just stand by that?
Because that's not what I'm doing. I'm defending the individual's right to keep and bear arms.
If anybody with common sense has been paying attention to the news in the last, really since forever, but especially since like the Colin Kaepernick stuff until now, it has been the conservative party that has been pro-police publicly, right? It's been the Democrats that have been publicly critical of the police, right? But there's being pro-police in the sense that to defend people in the public discourse, to say, oh, well, all police aren't bad. And then there's the supporting police in the sense of giving them mental health services, making sure that they're paid properly, making sure that they have the proper training, making sure that the policies and laws that are in place that actually allow them to do their job correctly. That is the type of contradiction that John Stewart is pointing out here. Police are specifically asking for certain things so that they can enforce the law. It is difficult to enforce these laws. It's difficult to solve crime. Very few crimes get solved. And who gets the brunt of the blame for that is the police. And so it's fascinating. This is a really, really good clip because it shows that there's a contradiction. Now, what the senator is going to say is it's all about the individual. And this is a talking point that really frustrates me. So they talk about these individuals as these extremely motivated offenders. So these people, if somebody, and you hear this with the talking point, if somebody wants to find a gun, they're going to find a gun. If somebody wants to kill somebody, they're going to kill somebody. And so there's this contrasting rhetoric that they use when they act like the law is helpless in certain instances. But what John Stewart's pointing out is there's a reason why this is the case is because you need to have policies and practices in place that allow you to enforce those gun laws and for them to be effective. It is not simply you change the law and then the law automatically has this effect. And where this really frustrates me is you compare that rhetoric that people who are motivated are just going to commit the crimes and the laws, they don't really do much, to the way that they talk about the change in behavior as a result of the civil rights movement. Now follow me with this one. When you hear like people like Ben Shapiro talk, they'll say systemic racism ended as soon as they passed those laws and made it illegal. They never talk about enforcement. They never talk what needs to be in place in order for the laws that were passed in the civil rights movement to actually have the effect that they need to have. You think it's hard to prosecute gun violence and you think it's hard to prosecute gun crimes. How much harder is it to prosecute something like a systemic discrimination in hiring practices? It's like very difficult in court to prove that these things have happened. And so it's just fascinating to me how we'll discuss both at the same time within the same right-wing rhetoric. The law will have ultimate power, as in the civil rights movement, when we just passed the laws and that ended the practice of systemic racism. And then you have the law that is also helpless, whereas we can pass gun laws all we want, but it's really about the individual. There's no amount of laws that are going to stop really highly motivated individuals. It's contradicting and it makes absolutely no sense. So the last clip we're going to get into is we're going to watch John Stewart walk this man down and drop the hammer on him.
I'll go you one further. You want to ban drag show readings to children?
To my eyes, yes.
Why?
Why
What are you protecting?
why can we prohibit children from voting, those under 18 from voting?
Why are you,
But also that
is that free speech? Are you infringing on that performer's free speech?
they can continue to exercise their free speech, just not in front of a child.
Why?
Because the government does have a responsibility to protect.
I'm sorry?
The government does have a responsibility in certain instances to
What's
protect.
the leading cause of death amongst children in this country? And I'm going to give you a hint. It's not drag show readings to children.
Correct, yes.
So what is it?
I'm presuming you're going to say it's firearms.
No, I'm not going to say it like it's an opinion. That's what it is. It's firearms. More than cancer, more than car accidents. And what you're telling me is you don't mind infringing free speech to protect children from this amorphous thing that you think of. But when it comes to children that have died, you don't give a flying fuck to stop that, because that shall not be infringed. That is hypocrisy at its highest order.
Yikes. I mean, I've argued with people. I love sports and I love arguing, and I've had some good moments where especially I'm a Jordan guy and I love the Jordan LeBron debate. I've walked some people down and dosed them, but that was a dose. First of all, at the beginning, he says the gun deaths are not as important because there's so many other things that matter more, right? Like the obesity, there's 7 times more people that die from obesity. There's cancer, there's other issues, right? So gun control is an issue, but it's not an issue as big as those other ones. So he brings up this proportion. We need to focus on other things because it's a higher proportion. Then John Stewart brings him back to, well, you're worried about drag queens, and drag queens aren't killing anybody. So when you're talking about the drag queen shows are killing 0 people, and the gun deaths are killing tens of thousands. So when you look at that proportion, it's completely different, but there's the contradiction. They don't actually care. All of what this does is reinforce the fact that this is all a dog and pony show, and they don't actually care. They're not actually committed to doing anything about this because it's not that big of a deal. So tell me what you guys think about this. Tell me what you think about John Stewart's performance. Tell me what you think about the senator. One thing that I can say is he stayed pretty chill because he was getting roasted, and I don't know if I could have been chill like that, but he stayed pretty chill, and they did cut off the last clip without showing what he said. So I didn't watch the entire interview, so it could be something else that he said that kind of turned the tables at a different part of the interview. So please leave a comment down below and tell me what you thought of this video. Please leave a like if you like this type of content. Subscribe and hit the bell so you could be notified of my next videos, and I'll see you on the flip side.